The Eternal Witness returned to Velmari space 3 weeks later. Velroth had spent most of that time in silence, thinking about everything he had seen. His crew was equally quiet, each processing the impossible truth in their own way. When they arrived at the Velmari homeworld, they found it exactly as they had left it. Beautiful cities covered in gardens, peaceful citizens going about their lives, a civilization that believed itself to be important, powerful, advanced. They had no idea how small they really were. Emperor Dralmoth summoned Velroth immediately. The throne room was filled with the highest officials of the Velmari Empire. Scientists, priests, military commanders, all waiting to hear about the primitive humans. Velroth stood before them and told the truth. Everything. The moved planets. The digital consciousnesses. The archive. The 47,000 worlds. The fact that humanity had been watching them for hundreds of thousands of years. Silence fell over the throne room like a heavy blanket. No one wanted to believe it. But Velroth showed them recordings from the Eternal Witness. He showed them the data that could not be faked. He showed them the face of Sung-Hee asking her haunting question. Why did you leave us alone when we needed you? Emperor Dralmoth aged 100 years in that moment. His scales lost their shine. His eyes dimmed. What do they want from us? I do not know, Emperor, Velroth admitted. They sent me back to tell you the truth. Beyond that, I received no demands, no threats, no requests. Within days, the news spread across the Velmari Empire. Panic began to set in. If humanity was so powerful, why had they revealed themselves now? What did they want? Were they planning an invasion? The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. 89 species gathered, representing most of the known civilizations in the galaxy. The session was held on a neutral station in deep space. Velroth was there to present his report. He told the assembled species everything he had learned. Many refused to believe. Others demanded proof. A few simply sat in stunned silence. Then the humans arrived. A small ship, barely larger than a shuttle, appeared outside the station. It had not used FTL drives. It had simply appeared as if transported across space by will alone. 2 humans stepped off the ship. One was a woman named Bora. She wore simple robes and carried herself with calm dignity. Her credentials identified her as a philosopher and diplomat, a human who had dedicated the last 30,000 years to understanding how different species thought and communicated. The other was a man named Seok Jin. He wore a military uniform but carried no weapons. His title was Strategic Analyst, which Velroth learned meant he spent his time studying how civilizations rose and fell, how conflicts began and ended, how peace could be maintained across vast distances and long ages. Bora spoke first. Her voice was gentle but carried to every corner of the council chamber. Honored representatives, thank you for allowing us to attend this session. I know our existence has caused fear and confusion. I am here to address those concerns. She walked to the center of the chamber, looking at each species delegation in turn. I am going to tell you a story. It is a true story, one that every human child learns when they are young, whether they are born biological or created digital. A hologram appeared above her, showing Earth as it was 500,000 years ago. This is where we began. In caves and simple shelters, struggling to survive in a harsh world. We were weak. We were ignorant. We were alone. The image shifted, showing various alien ships visiting and leaving. 7 species came to observe us in those early days. 7 species looked at our primitive civilization and decided we were not worth acknowledging, not worth helping, not worth welcoming into the community of thinking beings. Angry murmurs rose from several delegations. Bora raised a hand for silence. I am not here to accuse anyone. Those decisions were made hundreds of thousands of years ago by people who have long since died. I mention it only to provide context for what came next. The hologram showed the great dying, the desperate struggle for survival. Jiwoo and her generation changing themselves to survive. We learned something important in those dark years. We learned that we could only rely on ourselves, that we had to save ourselves because no one else would do it for us. The image fast-forwarded through human history, the development of digital consciousness, the first FTL drives, the slow expansion across the stars. We grew, we evolved. We became powerful. And as we became powerful, we faced a choice. Seok Jin stepped forward, his military bearing evident but not threatening. The choice was simple. We could become the kind of civilization that had abandoned us. Cold, distant, following protocols and laws that valued safety over compassion, or we could become something different. He showed images of human ships secretly helping other species, medical technology shared anonymously, solutions to problems delivered without asking for credit or payment. We chose to be the civilization we wished had found us when we were weak and alone. We chose to help. Bora nodded. But we also learned from our abandonment. We learned that we could never allow ourselves to be vulnerable again, never allow ourselves to need anyone's help or mercy. So we grew strong, stronger than any single species, perhaps stronger than all species combined. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Accusations flew. Threats were made. Fear and anger mixed in equal measure. Jokjin waited for the noise to die down, then spoke in a voice that cut through the chaos like a blade. You want to know what humanity wants? I will tell you. He projected a new image showing the entire galaxy. Humanity wants peace. We want neighbors, not subjects. We want cooperation, not domination. We want to share the universe with other thinking beings. But, he continued, his voice hardening, we will never again allow ourselves or anyone else to suffer alone as we once did. We will never again allow species to be abandoned or ignored simply because they are weak or primitive. Bora took over, so we offer you a choice. Every species in this chamber, every civilization in the galaxy must decide for themselves. She gestured to the hologram, which now showed a symbol. It looked like a circle with multiple hands reaching toward each other. Join us in the human commonwealth, not as subjects or servants, but as equals. Share your knowledge and culture, benefit from our technology and protection, work together to ensure no species ever feels alone in the universe again. Or, Seokjin said, his face serious, remain independent. We will respect your sovereignty. We will not interfere in your affairs. But you will face the universe on your own, just as humanity once did. And if you find yourselves in need of help, facing extinction or disaster, you will have to ask us for that help. You will have to admit that you need us. The weight of the choice settled over the council like a storm cloud. A young delegate from a species Velroth did not recognize stood up. What if we refuse both options? What if we fight you? Seokjin's expression did not change. Then you will lose, and we will still offer you the same choice afterward. We do not want enemies. We do not want war. But we will defend ourselves and our allies with the full power of our civilization if necessary. Emperor Dralmoth rose slowly from his seat. Every eye turned to him. The Velmari Empire was one of the oldest civilizations in the council. His decision would influence many others. I have a question, the Emperor said, his voice shaking. Why now? You have been watching us for hundreds of thousands of years. Why reveal yourselves now? Bora smiled sadly. Because we saw that the galaxy was fracturing, species isolating themselves, fear and mistrust growing. We realized that if we waited longer, there might be no peaceful galaxy left to join. She looked at the Emperor with eyes that held infinite compassion. And because you came back to Earth, after all this time you remembered us and came to check on us. That meant something to humanity. It meant you cared even if you came 500,000 years too late. Emperor Dralmoth was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke and tears ran down his scaled face. My ancestors made a terrible mistake when they left Earth without helping your people. I cannot undo that mistake. I can only offer my deepest apology and my people's commitment to never make such a mistake again. He bowed deeply, a gesture of ultimate respect in Velmari culture. The Velmari Empire will join the human commonwealth. We will work with you to ensure no species is ever abandoned as humanity once was. One by one, other species stood and made their choice. Some joined immediately. Others asked for time to consider. A few declared they would remain independent, and Bora assured them that choice would be respected. 3 weeks later, Velroth stood on Earth again, this time in the preservation zone at a simple memorial that had been built in a cave. The cave where humans had once huddled against the cold, starving and alone. Hyun was there, looking older now. His biological body was failing. He had chosen not to transfer to a digital form, preferring to die naturally after 300,000 years of existence. Thank you for coming, Hyun said. I wanted someone from the Velmari to be here at the end. What is this place? Velroth asked. A reminder, Hyun answered. Every human leader before they take office comes here. They sit in this cave and imagine what it was like to be those ancient humans, cold, hungry, afraid, alone. They feel that loneliness in their bones. 3 days later, the Eternal Witness traveled to a location that Yun called simply the Archive. They had left Earth's system and jumped across vast distances of space, arriving at a structure floating in the darkness between galaxies. The Archive was difficult to describe. It looked like a star at first, glowing with warm golden light. But as they approached, Velroth realized it was artificial. Layers upon layers of crystalline structures, each one larger than a planet, all rotating in perfect harmony. "What is this place?" Velroth asked. "The memory of humanity," answered a gentle voice. A human woman appeared on the bridge, not as a hologram but physically present. She had simply appeared as if she had always been there. "I am Sung-Hee. I am a keeper of memory." She looked elderly but moved with the grace of someone young. Her eyes held depths that made Velroth uncomfortable, as if she could see through him to his very soul. "I am one of the few humans who chose to remain partially biological," Sung-Hee explained. "My body is mostly synthetic now, but I keep an organic brain. I find it helps me understand the weight of memory, the pain of it." Deskar examined her instruments. "The energy output of this structure is enormous." "What does it do?" "It remembers," Sung-Hee said simply. "Every human who has ever lived, their consciousness was backed up before they died or transcended. Not just their thoughts and memories, but their complete pattern. Everything they were. The Archive holds them all." She led them through corridors that seemed to shift and change as they walked. The walls showed images, scenes from human history playing out in perfect detail. Velroth saw ancient humans hunting with spears. He saw the first cities being built. He saw wars and peace, love and hatred, triumph and tragedy. "You can speak with anyone," Sung-Hee said. "Anyone who ever lived. Would you like to meet someone from ancient Rome? Or perhaps someone from the digital revolution? Or maybe someone from the time when your ancestors visited Earth?" Corvex, who had been silent since leaving Earth, spoke up. "This is wrong. The dead should rest. They should not be kept as recordings to be played back like entertainment." Sung-Hee looked at him with compassion. "They are not recordings, High Priest. They are conscious. They think, they feel, they grow. Death became optional for humanity 450,000 years ago. These people chose to be preserved. They wanted to continue existing, to continue learning. Is it wrong to grant that wish?" She brought them to a vast chamber where billions of lights floated in the darkness. Each light was a consciousness, Sung-Hee explained. Each one a person who had lived and chosen to continue existing in the Archive. "I want you to meet someone," she said. One of the lights descended and took form. An elderly Velmari appeared, his scales showing the distinctive markings of their ruling class. "This is First Scholar Zix Thara," Sung-Hee introduced. "He was part of the expedition that visited Earth 500,000 years ago." Velroth felt his heart stop. "Impossible. Our people live at most 200 years. The old Velmari smiled sadly. "I died 497,000 years ago, young commander. But before I died, I did something that my people would consider heretical. I allowed the humans to scan my consciousness. To preserve me. I have existed here in the Archive ever since, watching humanity grow, learning from them." Corvex stepped back in horror. "Traitor! You betrayed your own kind." Zixathara shook his head. "I tried to convince my crew to make contact with the humans. I wanted to help them, to teach them, to welcome them into the community of thinking beings. But I was overruled. The captain said they were too primitive, that interfering would violate our protocols." He looked at Velroth with eyes full of ancient regret. "I watched the humans from orbit. I saw them struggling to survive in their caves. I saw children starving. I saw the sick dying because they had no medicine. And I did nothing because my orders were to observe only." "You followed the law," Velroth said, but his voice was uncertain. "I followed the law," Zixathara agreed. "And that choice haunts me still after all these hundreds of thousands of years. Because I know what happened after we left." Sung-Hee touched a wall in the chamber filled with images. It showed Earth in the years after the Velmari departure. It showed the great dying, the climate collapse, the desperate struggle for survival. "We almost went extinct," Sung-Hee said quietly. "If Jiwoo and her generation had failed, humanity would have died out completely. Every thought we have ever had, every story we ever told, every song we ever sang, all of it would have been lost forever." She showed them more images. Humans adapting, evolving, surviving against impossible odds. We made it through by ourselves. No help, no guidance, no mercy from the universe. just determination and the knowledge that we were alone. Another human appeared, this one wearing a military uniform that looked both ancient and futuristic. His name was displayed as Jae-hyun, Admiral of the First Fleet. "Greetings, Velmari," Jae-hyun said formally. "I have been asked to provide you with some context about humanity's current position in the galaxy." He waved his hand and the chamber transformed. A massive holographic galaxy appeared around them, stars and nebulae rendered in perfect detail. 40% of those stars were marked in blue. "This is human space," Jae-hyun explained. 47,000 worlds, 932 major shipyards, 315 research stations, and approximately 12,000 vessels of various sizes and capabilities. He zoomed in on one section of the galaxy. "This is Velmari space." Only a tiny cluster of stars was marked in their color. Perhaps 100 systems. The comparison was devastating. The Velmari Empire, which had considered itself a major galactic power, was tiny compared to human civilization. A small village next to a vast continent. "How long have you been this large?" Kralith asked, her voice shaking. "We reached our current size about 100,000 years ago," Jae-hyun said. "Since then we have maintained stable borders. We do not conquer. We do not expand aggressively. We simply live and grow and learn." He showed them more images. Human ships passing through Velmari space undetected. Human observers watching Velmari colonies, recording everything. Human scientists studying Velmari culture and technology. "We have been watching you," Jae-hyun said, "just as you once watched us. But we have tried to be kinder about it. We have shared some of our technology anonymously. Medical cures that appeared mysteriously at research facilities. Solutions to engineering problems delivered through untraceable messages. We have helped many species this way." Velroth felt anger rising through his shock. Why help us secretly instead of revealing yourselves?" Sung-hee answered, her voice heavy with sorrow. "Because we remember how it felt to be watched and not acknowledged. We remember the loneliness of it, the fear. We did not want other species to feel that way." Zixthera spoke again, his old voice filled with pain. "Do you understand now, Commander? Do you see what your ancestors' decision created? By leaving Earth without making contact, by treating humans as animals instead of people, they planted a seed. That seed grew into a civilization built on the memory of abandonment. We were following our laws," Velroth protested. "And your laws were wrong," Zixthera said flatly. "I spent 497,000 years thinking about that day, about what we should have done differently. I have discussed it with millions of humans, with the great thinkers and philosophers of hundreds of generations. And I have reached one conclusion. We were cowards." The word hung in the air like a curse. Sung-hee walked to a window that showed the space between galaxies. The Velmari were not the only ones who visited Earth in those early days. 7 other species came and observed and left, all of them following their protocols about primitive species, all of them choosing safety and law over compassion and risk. She turned to face the delegation. "And now I will tell you the haunting truth. The thing that keeps me awake during the long nights when I choose to sleep. The thing that we, the keepers of memory, must ensure humanity never forgets." Her eyes held infinite sadness. "Every species that visited early Earth and chose not to help, not to acknowledge us, not to welcome us as fellow beings, they created this. They created a civilization that trusts no one but itself, that relies on no one but itself, that needs no one but itself." Jae-hyun's hologram nodded grimly. "We are powerful now, perhaps the most powerful civilization in this galaxy. We can create wonders or horrors. We can uplift species or destroy them. We can reshape worlds or turn them to dust." He looked directly at Velroth. "And the only reason we have chosen to be kind, to be helpful, to be generous with our power is because we remember being weak. We remember being alone. We remember what it felt like when no one came to help us." Sung-hee stepped closer to the Velmari delegation. "So here is the question that haunts us, Commander. The question we need you to take back to your people. The question that every species in this galaxy must face." She paused, letting the weight of the moment build. "Why did you leave us alone when we needed you?" The question echoed through the archive, through the minds of billions of preserved consciousnesses who all remembered that abandonment. It echoed through time itself, connecting the desperate humans in caves to the godlike beings they had become. The Eternal Witness landed in a field of grass that stretched to the horizon. Real grass, Velroth realized with shock. Actual biological plants growing in actual soil under an actual sky. After seeing the technological marvels in orbit, this simple natural landscape felt surreal. Hyun led the Velmari delegation out of the ship. The air smelled of flowers and earth. Birds sang in nearby trees. A warm breeze carried the scent of an ocean somewhere beyond the distant hills. This is the preservation zone, Hyun explained. It covers approximately 30% of Earth's surface. Everything here is maintained exactly as it was 500,000 years ago. The same plants, the same animals, even the same weather patterns. Ambassador Kraleth, the Velmari diplomat who had been silent until now, spoke up. Her voice trembled. Why preserve it? If you have become so advanced, why keep this primitive landscape? Because we refuse to forget where we came from, a new voice said. A hologram materialized beside them, showing a tall human male with kind eyes. I am Dae-jung. I have been the chief architect of Earth for the past 90,000 years. Welcome to our home. Theskar stared at him. 90,000 years? You have been alive for 90,000 years? Dae-jung smiled. I have existed for 90,000 years. Whether that counts as being alive depends on your definition. My consciousness has been transferred to new forms many times. I have been biological, digital, quantum, and states you do not have words for. But yes, I have maintained continuous awareness for 90 millennia. He gestured for them to follow as his hologram walked through the grass. Let me show you something special. They walked for 10 minutes until they reached a cliff overlooking a vast plain. Below them, a city sprawled across the landscape. But this was not a human city. The buildings were wrong, the streets too wide, the parks too large, and walking through those streets were dinosaurs. Velroth felt his legs weaken. Creatures that should have been extinct for 65 million years moved through a modern city with purpose and intelligence. They wore clothes. They carried tools. They were building new structures with their clawed hands. We brought them back, Dae-jung said softly. About 200,000 years ago, we perfected genetic reconstruction. We could restore any extinct species from DNA fragments. But we did not just want to create animals. We wondered what would have happened if the asteroid had never hit Earth. What could the dinosaurs have become? A large creature that looked like a modified velociraptor noticed them and waved. It wore a tool belt and appeared to be directing construction on a new building. So we gave them intelligence, Dae-jung continued, enhanced their brains, gave them language, culture, technology. Now they build beside us. They are our friends, our colleagues, our fellow citizens of Earth. Korvex fell to his knees, his face showing complete horror. You play God. You resurrect the dead. You change the natural order. This is madness, perhaps, Dae-jung agreed. But consider this, High Priest. These beings would never have existed without the asteroid. They would never have had the chance to think, to dream, to create. We gave them that chance. Is that madness or mercy? Young Su's cheerful voice came from speakers hidden in the grass. Oh, you should see the mammoths. We brought them back too, and the saber-toothed cats and the giant sloths. They have their own cities in the northern preservation zone. The mammoths are really good at architecture. Something about their trunks makes them excellent at detail work. Hyun led them away from the cliff, deeper into the preservation zone. As they walked, Velroth noticed something strange. The landscape seemed to shimmer in places like heat waves on a desert. What you are seeing is the boundary between zones, Hyun explained. Earth is not really a solid planet anymore. We hollowed it out carefully, preserving the biosphere on the surface while converting the interior into something else entirely. They reached a small cave entrance. Hyun invited them inside. The cave was natural-looking at first, with rough stone walls and dripping water, but after 100 meters it opened into something impossible. The interior of Earth stretched before them, a vast hollow space filled with light and structures. Billions of structures. Cities floated in the air, connected by bridges of light. Entire ecosystems existed in bubbles of altered physics. Rivers flowed upward. Forests grew sideways. And everywhere there were people. This is the digital substrate, Young-Su said, his voice echoing through the massive space. Most of humanity lives here now. Not on the surface. Not even in physical form. We exist as patterns of energy and information, creating and experiencing realities that biology could never allow. Theskara pointed at one of the floating cities. How many people are in there? That particular note? About 2 million consciousnesses, but they are not experiencing the same reality. Each person can customize their environment, their body, their entire existence. Some choose to live in recreations of ancient Earth. Others prefer fantasy worlds or mathematical spaces. A few exist in dimensions that would hurt your mind to perceive. Velroth felt overwhelmed. This is just Earth? Just one planet? Daejung's hologram nodded. Earth is special because it is where we began. But yes, we have transformed many worlds this way. Some humans prefer to remain biological and live on traditional planets. Others, like Youngsu, exist purely in digital form. Most of us move between states as we wish. Biological when we want to feel grass beneath our feet. Digital when we want to explore mathematical concepts. Quantum when we want to exist in multiple places simultaneously. The group walked along a bridge that seemed to be made of solid light. Below them, Velroth could see schools where young consciousnesses learned from teachers who had existed for hundreds of thousands of years. Gardens where people grew ideas instead of plants. Laboratories where the laws of physics were treated as suggestions rather than rules. Kraleth, who had been silent and pale throughout the tour, finally spoke. You said this is a memorial, a museum. If Earth is just one world, where is your real civilization? Hyun and Daejung exchanged glances. Something passed between them, some shared knowledge that made them both look sad. We have 47,000 worlds, Daejung said quietly. Some are planets like Earth, transformed and hollowed and filled with life. Others are artificial, built from scratch in deep space. A few exist in pocket dimensions that we created ourselves. Together they house approximately 90 trillion human consciousnesses. The number was so large it felt meaningless. Velroth tried to comprehend it and failed. But that is not the haunting part, Hyun added. The haunting part is that we remember being 3,000 people huddled in caves, starving and afraid. We remember when dying at age 30 was considered a long life. We remember when the stars were just lights in the sky, impossibly far away. He looked at Velroth with eyes that had seen civilizations rise and fall. We remember when your ancestors came to visit us. We were so primitive we did not even know you were there. You watched us for a while, documented us like interesting animals and left. You never said hello, never offered help, never acknowledged us as fellow thinking beings. We had rules, Velroth said weakly, protocols for contacting primitive species. I know, Hyun said. We have similar rules now. We understand why you did not contact us, but you need to understand what that abandonment did to us. It created a wound in our collective consciousness, a fear that we would always be alone, always be vulnerable, always be at the mercy of others who saw us as primitives. Daejung's hologram placed a hand on Hyun's shoulder in comfort. That fear drove us. It made us determined to become strong enough that we would never need anyone's help again, never need anyone's permission, never need anyone's mercy. Youngsu's voice was softer now, less cheerful. Earth is a memorial to what we were, but it is also a reminder of what we became and why. Every human child, whether born biological or created digital, comes here at least once. They walk through the preservation zone. They see the caves where we once huddled. They learn about the great dying, and they learn about the day the Velmari came and left without saying hello. The words hit Velroth like a physical blow. His species had become part of humanity's mythology. Not as saviors or teachers, but as the ones who abandoned them. Where is your real civilization? Kraleth asked again, her voice barely a whisper. Hyun smiled, but there was no joy in it. Everywhere, Ambassador. Humanity is everywhere. This galaxy is 40% human now. Not conquered. Not occupied. Just settled, slowly and carefully over hundreds of thousands of years. We are your neighbors. We have been your neighbors for a very long time. You just did not know it. As they stood in the heart of the transformed Earth, surrounded by wonders and horrors that defied understanding, Velroth finally understood the truth. Velroth agreed to follow the human ship. What choice did he have? The massive vessel moved through space with impossible grace, and the eternal witness followed like a child trailing behind a parent. Inside the medical bay, Hyun sat across from Velroth and High Priest Corvex, the spiritual leader of the Velmari expedition. The priest had insisted on being present, his religious robes flowing around his thin frame. His face showed disgust as he looked at Hyun. This is unnatural, Corvex said. You should have remained as you were, simple, pure, living short lives close to the earth. Hyun smiled sadly. Would you like to see why we could not stay that way? I can show you our history, all of it. Before anyone could answer, Hyun touched a small device on his wrist. A neural interface beam connected to the Velmari computer systems with ease that made Theskara gasp. Their most advanced security did nothing to stop it. Images filled the air around them, holographic and crystal clear. They showed Earth as it was 250,000 years ago. A young human woman appeared in the projection. She stood in a primitive laboratory surrounded by other humans who looked worried and afraid. The woman had determined eyes, and her name appeared in the translation, Jiwoo, Chief Scientist of the United Clans. This was taken during what we call the Great Dying, Hyun explained. The climate was changing rapidly. Volcanoes had erupted across the planet. The sky filled with ash. Temperatures dropped. Food became scarce. We were dying, Commander. My species was down to less than 10,000 individuals. The images showed terrible scenes. Humans huddled in caves, starving. Children crying. The old lying down in the snow to die so the young could eat their rations. Jiwoo spoke in the projection, her voice strong despite the despair around her. We cannot wait for the earth to heal. We cannot pray to gods who do not answer. We cannot hope for saviors from the stars who will never come. If we are to survive, we must save ourselves. We must become more than what we are. The scene shifted. It showed Jiwoo and her team working frantically, combining primitive genetic knowledge with desperate innovation. They were modifying themselves, changing their own bodies to survive the cold, to need less food, to endure. She succeeded, Hyun said quietly. Barely. Jiwoo and her generation created the foundation for everything that came after. They proved that humans could change themselves, could evolve by choice rather than by chance. Velroth watched as the timeline advanced. Humans spread across the frozen earth, adapting, surviving, growing stronger. 10,000 years passed in seconds, then 50,000, then 100,000. Around 200,000 years ago, something remarkable happened. Humans discovered how to transfer consciousness into machines, if only temporarily. Another 50,000 years, and the transfer became permanent. Death became optional. Wait, Theskara interrupted. You achieved digital consciousness 450,000 years ago? 462,000 to be precise, Hyun confirmed. And once we did that, everything accelerated. Minds that could not die could learn forever, could experiment forever, could build forever. The timeline showed humanity's first FTL drive created 390,000 years ago. Velroth felt his skin turn pale blue again. His people had achieved FTL 2 million years ago, and considered themselves the second oldest spacefaring race in the galaxy. You have had faster than light travel for almost 400,000 years, he whispered. Yes, Hyun said. And we have been watching you for most of that time. We have been watching many species, actually. Learning. Observing. Making sure we understood the galaxy before we revealed ourselves. Corvex stood suddenly, his face twisted with anger and fear. This is an abomination. You have abandoned your bodies, your mortality, your very souls. You are no longer the species the universe intended you to be. Hyun looked at the priest with eyes that held deep sadness. We became what we needed to be to survive. No one was coming to save us, High Priest. No advanced species offered us help or guidance. We were alone in the dark, and we either evolved or died. The images shifted again, showing the solar system transforming. Earth being carefully moved to a new orbit, Mars being terraformed, Jupiter being dismantled and converted into construction materials for massive space habitats, the sun being partially enclosed in energy collectors. Outside the medical bay window, Corporal Mirai's ship began to broadcast a message. Her face appeared on every screen. We are approaching Earth now, she said. Prepare yourselves, honored guests. What you are about to see may be difficult to understand. The Eternal Witness emerged from FTL near a yellow star, but this was not the original sun. This was an artificial star, created and maintained by technology that made Velmari science look like children playing with rocks. And there, in perfect orbit around this manufactured sun, was Earth, except it was not the Earth that Velroth's ancestors had visited. The planet was still blue and green, but it was surrounded by rings of structures so intricate and vast that they defied comprehension. The moon was gone, replaced by 7 smaller artificial satellites that glowed with internal light. By the first light, Theskara breathed. What have you done? Hyun stood and walked to the window. We saved our home. And then we made it into something more, something that would stand as a reminder of where we came from and how far we traveled. Mirai's ship moved closer to Earth, and the Eternal Witness followed. As they approached, Velroth could see that the planet's crust had been transformed. It appeared hollow in places with light shining from within. Earth is no longer just a planet, Hyun explained. It is a memorial, a museum, a reminder to all humanity of what we were and what we became. Another human appeared on the communication screen. He was middle-aged, wearing simple clothes, and his name was displayed as Dae-jung, Chief Architect of Earth Preservation. "Welcome to Earth," Dae-jung said warmly. "Or rather, welcome to what remains of original Earth. Most of my people do not live on planets anymore. We find them limiting, but this world, this specific place is sacred to us. It is where we began." Velroth found his voice. "How many humans are there now?" Dae-jung smiled. "That is a complicated question. If you mean biological humans, perhaps a few billion who choose to maintain organic forms. If you mean total human consciousnesses, including those who exist in digital space and quantum networks in forms you would not recognize as life at all." He paused. "The number is very large, Commander. Very large indeed." A new voice joined the conversation, young and cheerful. "Hi, my name is Young-soo. I live inside Earth's core. Well, not the actual core. That is still molten iron. But in the digital substrate that surrounds it, there are about 40 billion of us down here. We maintain the planet's systems and welcome visitors." Korvac sat down heavily, his face showing complete shock. 40 billion consciousnesses living inside the planet itself? "Oh, that is just in Earth," Young-soo said happily. "Each of our worlds has similar populations, and we have many worlds now. Many, many worlds." Hyun placed a hand on Velroth's shoulder, a gesture of comfort. "I know this is overwhelming. Your people came here expecting to find primitives who had perhaps invented the wheel. Instead, you found gods." "We are not gods," Velroth said weakly. "No," Hyun agreed. "You are not. But neither are we. We are simply humans who had 500,000 years to grow up. 500,000 years of knowing we were alone. 500,000 years of understanding that no one was coming to save us." Mirai's voice came through again. "We are ready to bring you down to the surface. Dae-jung has prepared a special tour. He wants you to see what we preserved, what we could not bear to change." As the Eternal Witness prepared to descend, Velroth looked at Hyun. "Why did you wait for us? Why leave yourself in stasis for 300,000 years just to greet us when we returned?" Hyun's eyes held infinite sadness. "Because someone needed to explain. Someone who remembered the old days, the primitive days, needed to help you understand. You came here expecting to study animals. Instead, you found equals. Or perhaps more than equals. That is a hard truth to face." The ship began its descent to Earth, and Velroth realized with growing horror that this was only the beginning. Everything he was about to see would shake the foundations of Velmari civilization. The primitives they had abandoned had become something magnificent and terrifying, and they had been watching all along. The stars bent and twisted as the massive ship dropped out of faster-than-light speed. Commander Velroth stood on the bridge of the Eternal Witness, his three eyes fixed on the view screen. After traveling for what felt like moments but measured as centuries in normal space, they had finally arrived back at the small yellow star. 500,000 years ago, his ancestors had visited this system. They had found a primitive world with simple creatures that walked on two legs. These creatures used stones as tools and lived in caves. The Velmari had observed them for a few months, taken samples, and left. According to their predictions, these humans should have barely discovered farming by now. Navigator Theskara called out from her station. Her voice carried confusion and concern. "Commander, the readings make no sense. I am detecting massive energy signatures throughout the entire system." Velroth moved closer to examine the data himself. His skin turned pale blue, a sign of shock in his species. The third planet, Earth, showed power outputs that rivaled a small star. But that was not the strangest part. Jupiter had been completely dismantled. Where the gas giant should have been, there was now a ring of structures so vast they made his ship look like a grain of sand. "This cannot be correct," he said. "Check the navigation. We must be in the wrong system." Theskara worked quickly, her fingers dancing across the controls. After several minutes, she looked up. "Navigation is confirmed, Commander. This is definitely the Sol system. But Earth is not where it should be. The planet has been moved." The words hung in the air like a threat. A planet moved. The energy required for such a task was beyond even Velmari technology. They had been a spacefaring civilization for 2 million years, and they could not move planets. Scan for life signs, Velroth ordered. His primary heart beat faster. Something was very wrong. Before Theskara could respond, an alert sounded. The sensors had detected something in deep space far from any planet. It was a small object, artificial, emitting a weak power signature. It appears to be a stasis pod, Theskara reported. The design is primitive but functional. There is a life form inside. Velroth made a decision. Bring it aboard. Perhaps whoever is inside can explain what happened here. The recovery took an hour. The pod was brought into the medical bay, where their chief physician, a younger Velmari named Korval, examined it carefully. The technology was indeed primitive, perhaps only a few 100,000 years old. But it was still working, still keeping its occupant frozen in time. Should we open it? Korval asked. Velroth nodded. We need answers. The pod hissed as its seals released. White vapor poured out as the temperature normalized. Inside, a human male lay perfectly preserved. He appeared to be middle-aged by human standards, with dark hair and Asian features. As the stasis field faded, his eyes opened. The human sat, up slowly, looking around the medical bay with calm, steady eyes. He showed no fear, no confusion. Instead, he smiled. You must be the Velmari, the human said in perfect Velmari language. Took you long enough to come back. Velroth stepped forward, his diplomatic training taking over despite his shock. I am Commander Velroth. You speak our language. How is this possible? The human stretched his arms and climbed out of the pod. My name is Hyun. I was a scientist, about 300,000 years ago by your calendar. I volunteered to wait in stasis at the edge of the system. We knew you would eventually return to check on us. He laughed, a warm sound that somehow made Velroth nervous. We have been waiting for you. We? Theskara asked from the doorway. What do you mean by we? Hyun walked to the window and looked out at the stars. Humanity. We have been watching your civilization for quite some time now. In fact, we have been watching many civilizations. It is what we do. The words made no sense. Velroth felt his third heart skip a beat. That is impossible. When we left this world, your people barely had language. You lived in caves. You had no technology. That was 500,000 years ago, Commander, Hyun said softly. A lot can happen in 500,000 years. As if responding to his words, the ship's alert system screamed. Every sensor on the Eternal Witness activated at once. Theskara ran to the nearest console, her face turning white with fear. Commander, a ship just appeared next to us. It was not there a second ago. No FTL signature, no energy buildup. It just appeared. On the view screen, a vessel materialized. It was enormous, dwarfing the Eternal Witness like an ocean liner next to a rowboat. Its hull was a dark metal that seemed to absorb light. Strange symbols glowed along its surface, pulsing with power that made their instruments go haywire. A face appeared on their communication screen. It was a young human woman in a military uniform. She had short black hair and carried herself with absolute confidence. This is Corporal Mirai of the Solar Defense Fleet, she said in Velmari language. Welcome back to our system, Velmari. We have been expecting you. Please do not be alarmed. We mean you no harm. Velroth found his voice. Solar Defense Fleet? You have a fleet? Mirai smiled. We have many fleets, Commander, but do not worry about that now. Dr. Hyun, I see you are awake. Good. Will you bring our guests to Earth? I think they need to see what we have built. Hyun nodded to the screen, then turned to Velroth. The old scientist's eyes held something the commander could not quite identify. Pity, perhaps, or sadness. Commander, I know this is overwhelming, Hyun said. Your ancestors came to Earth and found us living like animals. You watched us for a while, took some samples, and left. You probably thought we would destroy ourselves or remain primitive forever. We meant no harm, Velroth said quietly. We have rules about contacting primitive species. I know, Hyun replied. We have similar rules now. We understand why you left. But you need to understand something, Commander. Being left alone, being abandoned when we were so vulnerable, it changed us. It made us determined to never be helpless again. Never to need anyone else's help or mercy. He walked to the door, then paused and looked back. Your people came to Earth and saw primitives. You thought you were so advanced, so superior. You left us behind like children playing in the dirt. Hyun's voice was gentle but carried weight. Let me show you what those children built after you left. Let me show you what humanity became when we decided to grow up. The invitation hung in the air. Outside the window, the human warship waited. Fast and patient and terrifying in ways Velroth could not fully comprehend. Everything he thought he knew about the universe was about to change.